So yesterday, the Labour Party posted this, wishing you a meaningful Yom Kippur. Now, as my friend Academic Agent often says, Keir Starmer must wake up every single morning hoping, I hope that nothing awful happens today. Of course, the early part of his regime was dogged by his cack-handed response to the massacre of little girls at a dance class in Southport. So he must go through every single day just hoping, please don't let this the day when something awful happens. Unfortunately, something awful has happened on Yom Kippur. So Keir Starmer has had to come out instead with thoughts and platitudes. He's appalled by the attack on the synagogue. So if you haven't seen this, there was an attack in Manchester on a synagogue, and I'm hearing conflicting reports. Something like 2 or 4 people, it could be more, I don't know. People have been killed in what was apparently started off as a hit and run, followed by a stabbing, and this guy may have been wearing a bomb vest, who was shot by police on the scenes. More details will be emerging. I did have a post to show you there. Unfortunately, it's already been censored. So in the 5 minutes between me putting it in here and me starting to record, so that's going to have to go. What about this one? No, this one's been censored as well. Okay, so what I would have told you is that there are videos circulating of what the attack appears to be, and it looks like a man of, shall we say, Middle Eastern extraction. Wearing what looks like a vest of some sort of padded vest, presumably meant to either be or infer that he is wearing a explosive vest, is shot by police outside of this synagogue, and after they shoot him, they're still rather concerned, and they're yelling at people to get back because they don't know what he's wearing and what's going on. And also in these videos, and I wouldn't have been able to play them anyway, I'd only better pause it and jump around a little bit. You see various dead individuals outside of the synagogue in traditional Jewish dress. So what do we know about this so far? Well, the BBC is on hand to tell us what they know about the attack on the Manchester synagogue. They go through some incidents of what happened. Let's cut to the bit, shall we, about what do we know about the suspect. Oh, there we go. We got a photo that I couldn't have shown you before. We got a photo of the suspect, like I say, a man of perhaps Middle Eastern extraction. And wearing this sort of padded vest, holding something. Well, he's holding both a knife and something that appears to be a button linked to the vest. Now, I have gone through this article and I've even hit Control F because I'm curious, because it is the hot topic in Britain today, that there is a bit of racial conflict going on. So I hit Control F and I did a search for Jews, and I found 12 entries in this BBC article. I then did a Control F for Islam and then for Muslim, and got absolutely nothing. So the BBC doesn't believe there's any sort of racial component to this, or maybe they're just being cautious, because of course we do live in a country where if after an attack like this you speculate as to who might have possibly done it and for what reasons, you will be arrested, and if they can get away with it, you will be jailed. That genuinely happened over the Southport riot. A number of people came out and said, well, this looks a bit Islamic to me, and they were arrested and jailed. It later emerged that the individual did indeed have Islamic terrorist training materials all over their computer and in their home, somewhat vindicating the poor people who were in jail, but of course they weren't let out and their sentences weren't overturned, and those who managed to successfully combat the police action were not compensated for the harassment and abuse. Honestly, I don't even know if I'm going to be arrested for making this speculation, quite possibly, and you should be aware that you might be too if you comment on this on social media, and you make some sort of speculation as to what this man of Middle Eastern extraction, who murdered people at a synagogue on Yom Kippur, what possibly could have been his motivations. That is an arrestable offence in Britain today. I wonder how we got into this situation. The BBC are not so cautious, however, but immediately blaming the far right. Let's listen to how they managed to connect the dots here in this video.
People on the hard right, the far right, are a bit divided on their attitude to the Jewish community these days in the UK. But certainly the Jewish community has felt that they were at risk from multiple directions, some from the sort of extremist Islamist direction, but also some from the kind of neo-Nazi elements on the.
So indeed, the BBC unwilling to make any connection to any Middle Eastern ideologies, but here they are immediately trying to connect it to the far right. I wonder if that is because the BBC are a bunch of traitorous liars, or if it's simply because they're worried about being arrested, which actually is very likely in Britain today if you say the wrong things about the wrong people. Now, let's have a look at this map of Manchester to see what the authorities have, in their wisdom, decided would be a good idea. Basically, they're recreating the Middle East in this one. So let's start with what is this? Borough Park. This is Borough Park. This is an ethnicity map of Manchester. And you can see in Borough Park that the population of this region is about 57% Jewish. And then let's have a look at this area just over here in the next image, the neighbouring area. And you'll see that right next door in Crumpsall South, right next door to this large Jewish community here, this area around here is 69% Muslim. So the British state has, in its infinite wisdom, decided to recreate a mini sort of Middle East here. And shocking to discover that violence could erupt in the mist. I have no idea how that could have happened. Well, I do, but I don't want to get arrested. Now, I also saw this. No idea if it's true. No idea about the legitimacy of this particular poster. Seems to have a decent following. Seems to do a lot of investigative journalism type stuff. So I don't know if this is true, but he's suggesting that the state have been flying in people from Gaza into Manchester, and they've been landing these planes at night and sort of smuggling these people in, 500 men per night, he's suggesting. Don't know if it's true. The only thing I would say, well, I mean, first of all, it won't be from Gaza because there's no functional airports in Gaza or Syria, but it could be from somewhere else. The thing I would say is it's believable. I don't know if it's true, but it is exactly the sort of thing that our government would do. And of course, if you're shipping people in from Gaza under the cover of night and then putting them right next to a Jewish area, it would not shock me to discover that there were some negative consequences from that happening. My colleague here at the Lotus Heaters, Nick Dixon, he's been pointing out this. This is the demographics of Manchester. Now, census used to, prior to 1991, it didn't record white British, because I suppose that's mainly the thing we're interested in. Native British people is probably the key benchmark to judge the population change against. Before 1991, it was simply white, but it would have been the same thing, basically. So demographics of Manchester, 99% native in the 1940s, 99% in the 1950s, and so on. And as you can see, it starts to drop in the 70s. Of course, that was when the first influx from Pakistan began. There was a nasty flood in a bit of Pakistan. It also happens to be the most... how to put this? The most progressive with their views on relationships with children. I'll put it that way. Some incest in this particular region of Pakistan. Anyway, he got hit by a flood in the 1970s. The government decided, let's start bringing as many of them as here as possible, because, you know, how could that possibly go badly? So it starts to drop in the 1970s and the 80s. We're still clinging to 91%. By the 1990s, it's now dipping into 80, and then it starts to travel really quite fast over the last 20 years. 74%, just under 60%, now under 50%. So there has been quite rapid demographic change in Manchester. I wonder if that is a factor. Here's Wolf, quite a good Twitter poster chap. He's talking here about the demographics of Britain. Now, it's true that we are headed in the late 2050s to become a minority British country. Britain will become a minority British country. Wonderful. We can all look forward to that. And but amongst the youth, this is taking place much more quickly. It's only because we've got so many boomers who are sort of lingering on that the figures aren't already showing the true extent of the change. This is what is this? This must be. Is this under 18s? It's something like that. But this is the youth. Oh no, this is birth. So this is the current birth situation. It is majority native British, but only just based on current births. The moment that flips over 50%, the fact that we are becoming a minority British country is inevitable. It is simply a matter of time. So, this demographic replacement is happening extremely fast. Not that we can draw any conclusions. Well, we can, but we don't want to get arrested. Not that we can draw any conclusions from that, but you would imagine that is having an impact. Now, obviously, my focus is for the native British, because I am native British, and I don't think there's anything wrong with people having a country of their own. I know that might make me far right to some, but that is my view. I think the Japanese should have Japan and blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. Anyway, so even though my focus is on the native British, I would point out the Jewish population has actually been quite static. In the 1900s, as he points out here, there were about 250,000 Jews in Britain, and today there's 300,000. So, I mean, yes, a modest increase, but it is basically a rather static position. The Muslims, on the other hand, 10,000 of them in 1900, and we're sort of knocking on the door of 6 million today, and going up fast. So, one of these areas of Manchester, the Middle Eastern extraction one, that they both are, aren't they? But how to put it, the somewhat more proactive when it comes to political expression through the form of I have to choose my words very carefully here. Well, you know what I mean anyway. That group is growing very fast. Now, I've recently done a Brokenomics with Faraz. Faraz is a Lebanese exile. He's a Christian. And he was talking about the history of Lebanon with me. And basically, Lebanon used to be a Christian majority country. And the Muslim population, it ticked up and it ticked up and it ticked up. And then the killings began, checkpoints began, civil war began. And basically, the Lebanese Christians lost. And that's why there are something like 14 million ethnic Lebanese living outside of Lebanon, and only 4 or 5 million living inside Lebanon. It is the case that if you get demographically replaced, you can lose your country. There are recent examples. And this war in the mid-70s in Lebanon, or was it early 80s? I forget now. But it can happen. You can lose your country. And interestingly, the demographics at the point where it got rather kinetic in Lebanon are very close to the demographics that we have now. Especially if you look at the youth, which is, of course, the bit which is more likely to get proactive. So, yes, bear in mind that what happened there, if the demographic count is anything to go by, is on the verge of happening here. I was also somewhat troubled to see this post from an NHS doctor, apparently, Said Mushid Nori. He says, "I'm a Muslim. Daily I treat Jews. I have taken a Hippocratic oath that outlines my responsibilities in the Buckingham crew. However, I must admit that if I had the power, I would vanish every Jew. Yes. Now, if me or any of my anyone who follows me on Twitter were to post the same thing, we would be spending the rest of our lives in jail for a tweet like that. I have no idea if this guy's even going to get fired from the NHS. Maybe he will. Maybe he will now. But should we say standards are not being applied equally when it comes to the absolute thumping that anyone on the right gets from this government, and I wonder if maybe they need to think carefully about the situation they are engineering in Manchester and any other areas across the country. That is what I think about. Connor, formerly of this parish, it also points out that, of course, there is a very strong Islamic network in the Home Office, 700 plus members. People who know the Home Office, who I know, tells me that yes, it is a very Islamic place, the Home Office. They will no doubt be jumping into action on the back of this, presumably to foster up some sort of campaign like, the last time there was not the last time, but you remember the Manchester Arena bombing? Many people, including children, grisly murdered in a bomb attack. What did they come out and tell us? Don't look back in anger. Every time there is an Islamic attack, not saying that this particular one has anything to do with Islam. Of course, we don't know, and I don't want to go to jail. But if it does turn out to be that, then of course we have departments coming out of the Home Office whose job is to immediately start managing the message. They start going out, they speak to the relatives, they get them to go up on stage and basically endorse government immigration policy and call for calm, call for everybody to forget about it and go on with their lives. So I wonder if that will be happening on this occasion. It prompted me to put up this slightly satirical tweet that, if only Keir Starmer had done more to combat the far right and their hateful rhetoric about mass deportations, perhaps this horrific attack could have been avoided. He's obviously not been coming down on the far right enough. And perhaps that's why this gentleman here of Middle Eastern extraction thought that he would do the horrific attack that he did. Yes, citing that that previous bit. The Guardian. Don't look back in anger becomes Manchester's spirit. Yes. Yeah. Every time something like this happens, don't look back in anger. Prayers and platitudes, move on swiftly. Forget about it. We're not supposed to learn anything from this. We're not supposed to think that at any point the rapid demographic change that we're going through could possibly have any downsides. No, just forget it and move on. That's the official line. That won't get you arrested. Interestingly, as the Express and another Umber papers reporting, not that long ago. What is this? This is Friday, September the 19th of this year. So, not even a bit over a week ago. ISIS calls for slaughter of Christians and Jews in UK attacks. Shoot, stab, and ram. Well, I mean, we had all of those today, didn't we, in Manchester? The shooting came from the police, but in other respects we had all of those today. So I wonder who the Islamic State were targeting in their messaging. I mean, presumably maybe this was a message to the far right or something. Maybe this is why we need to crack down so relentlessly on anybody who advocates for right-wing policies and a bit of deportation, and anyone who produces a sticker. Put that guy in jail for 2 years. But for the rest of them, obviously, just gloss over that. I mean, God, what am I worried about? Nothing really. So yes, Prime Minister has come out and said that this morning's attack is completely shocking. He's on his way back to London, and he has authorised special protection for Jewish. He says the Jewish community, synagogues. So he's deploying police to synagogues all over the country. Good, as he should, because of course, look, if you can't build deterrent around your country, if you can't build a wall around your country, you need to build a wall around everything in your country instead. So Parliament already has I mean, it already had concrete barriers, but now it's getting, 9-foot high fences. The Prime Minister already has, armed security. Now the Jewish community is going to get it as well. I suspect that the young British girls who have to walk past the migrant centres, they're not going to get any of this protection. No, they don't get it. But thank God at least the Prime Minister and the Jewish community do get it, as they should, because, of course, when you let anyone who wants to come in, when you recreate the Middle Eastern situation in your own country, I mean, you've got no choice to do this. It's just a shame that protection cannot be provided to everyone who actually needs it now. Final point I make on this sad, horrific incident is all the politicians have been coming out with their copy and paste stock responses to this. It's very sad, I'm horrified, blah, 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 that you know the thing. And every politician has got a version of this up. And it all looks like it's been copied and pasted from each other with just a few minor changes. It's a standard platitude. The thing that I found interesting, though, is when you go through the replies and the quote tweets, what you're struck by is all the people saying, this is on you. This is on you. You created this situation. And I happen to be scrolling through Shabana Mahmood's stock response here, but it is the same for Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch. They're all getting the exactly same response. You created this situation. There's only one mainstream politician who's not getting this response, and it's Nigel Farage. Now, I might have my criticisms of Farage of being a bit milquetoast, and he doesn't want to do mass deportations either. But he is the only one where you're not getting people lining up and saying, you did this. This man is going to be an absolute shoo-in at the next general election because he's the only one who's not tainted by this. And yet the established political class remain absolutely wedded to this narrative that we must continue to import as many people as we can. We must under no account even consider mass deportations, and that actually the far right is really the problem. This is obviously nonsense, and this line cannot stand.